are dying every day all over the world because of people like you.
Rush Limbaugh is one of the 90s most controversial figures.
Feminists in America today are outdated.
The reason that Trump was so effective with fake news, it started with Limbaugh.
First on radio, then TV.
Whenever we see gays in the military, we're going to go...
Limbaugh attacks men.
The NFL all too often looks like a game between the Bloods and the Crips.
Women.
We're going to do a feminazi update.
And even children.
That's the kid.
I don't think anybody was comfortable with that. I got the sense that he was beaten up when he was younger.
He'll spend the decade and beyond spreading hate and conspiracies.
Democrats are evil. Democrats are not patriotic.
The modern Republican Party has been reshaped in Limbaugh's image.
It's Limbaugh's rhetoric that will fuel the right-wing populism that taints our politics today.
He purposely divided America.
Limbaugh bills himself as the most dangerous man in America. Why? Well, why not? He has the hottest radio talk show in the country.
Ladies and gentlemen.
In the 90s, one man gives voice to the id of American conservatism.
It seems everywhere you look, there he is, on the billboards and in the bookstores.
With his radio and TV shows, Rush Limbaugh will push together a cult following by pulling America apart.
You know what all caused this? Me!
But Limbaugh's rise to become the king of blue-collar conservatism is no rags to riches story. More like riches to even more riches.
This guy grew up in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Relatively well-off, very Republican family.
His dad was a corporate lawyer and a Republican leader.
His father was very politically opinionated and loved to spout off at the dinner table. Friends remember this. You know, when you went to the Limbaugh dinner table, you were getting a seminar and things.
As a teenager, Limbaugh dreams of one day spinning records for a top 40 radio station.
He grew up loving radio. He was kind of viewed as the failure of the family. I'm Brian Roosevelt. I'm the author of Talk Radio America, how an industry took over a political party that took over the United States. And he goes off to college and only lasts like 1 year because his heart's not in it, he's not interested in it, and he heads off to try to do radio. Limbaugh was a good DJ, but he was exactly the type of person who didn't listen to his boss. He was the kind of DJ who would call the local pizza place and order 5,000 pizzas and tell them he was from the competing station. And so that's a very poor strategy for remaining employed.
After getting fired from jobs across the Midwest, Limbaugh scores his first real break at KFBK in Sacramento.
He got the job because another right-wing talk show host made some sort of ethnic slur and was fired. His name was Morton Downey Jr.
If you disagree with what you hear, don't blame us. Blame it on Morton Downey Jr.
Morton Downey Jr. will soon be known for his angry antics on his late-night TV show. But in 1984, he's a loudmouth DJ talking politics on KFBK.
And he says something racist about a city councilman, and so they fire Downey and they have a slot.
Limbaugh gets that job, but to appeal to Morton Downey's audience, he tweaks what he talks about on the mic.
And you have to understand that at the time that Limbaugh goes to Sacramento, he is not that political. This guy's never been registered to vote. He's in his 30s. But he's just sort of applying the shtick that he had developed as a DJ to political conversation. And he has a good time, and he's doing gags and all this kind of stuff.
So I have a little joke I'm going to play on the light company. We will call him up on the phone right now.
Limbaugh's new act is heard by Ed McLaughlin, the head of ABC Radio. He's got an opening at WABC, the company's flagship station in New York City.
He moves to New York July 4th weekend of 1988, and August 1st of 88, he debuts national.
With talent on loan from God.
In New York, Howard Stern has already established himself as the king of the FM dial by syndicating his show to stations across the country.
Howard Stern starts to kind of pioneer the raunchier, in-your-face, what they call guy talk that could be really sexual.
Stern was so outrageous on last night's Tonight Show, NBC issued a formal apology to its viewers.
They talk a little politics, but it was mostly focused on sex and women and popular culture and that kind of thing, and it pushed the boundaries of propriety.
But while Howard reinvents to do the same thing with political radio.
Paramount Pictures presents Bill Clinton in Taxula.
It's hard to understate how different and unique and fresh his show feels.
There's no doubt that the Rush Limbaugh radio show was pretty inventive. There was more comedy. Limbaugh had an amazing talent of connecting with his audience. He did it unlike other right-wing ranters on the radio.
On loan from God, Rush Limbaugh. Here on the Excellence in Broadcasting Network.
Calls his network the Excellence in Broadcasting Network, and EIB1 is plane when he gets wealthy enough to have a plane.
And that was very sticky, you know what I mean? Excellence in broadcasting, you know, it was all this, I wouldn't even say it was marketing because it was way more campy than marketing, you know.
Limbaugh quickly makes a name for himself by belittling liberal beliefs.
Morality is not defined by individual choice. You hear that, you liberals?
He has collar abortions. He plays a vacuum cleaner sound effect and screaming in the background while hanging up on liberal collars. And his point, he stops them after a short period of time, but his point is that they're more controversial than actual abortions. So he's making a conservative political point, but he's not just lecturing on it. It's not a sermonizer. This is not church. This is fun.
Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah. The first time I heard Rush Limbaugh, I vividly remember driving to my sister's house in Cincinnati. I turned him on. I'm somewhere in the middle of Indiana, and here's this energetic, kind of off-the-wall guy.
Yes, Gentlemen Square, nuclear weapons on!
Who's speaking to me. I am Joe Walsh, former Illinois congressman, former Republican candidate for president, and former Rush Limbaugh listener.
Before Rush, conservatives complained that no one on TV or radio speaks for them.
Generally, if you were right of center, you'd get pounded. You'd get criticized.
And that the mainstream media is biased against them and their values.
ABC, CBS, NBC, they're all left of center. CNN, left of center. I mean, most of the media in America has always been left of center.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I hope I've answered your questions as best I could, given the very little that I know.
So to have somebody like Rush Limbaugh beat them up, it was refreshing.
The country was moving to the right since Reagan, and there had been backlash from the feminist movement.
This is a kind of peak moment in the culture wars. You've got a lot of white Christians, especially white Christian men, who feel like the world has been turned upside down on them over like 20 years.
Telling these men, well, you can't call black people colored anymore. You can't call women girls anymore.
And it's these white conservative men who see in Rush Limbaugh a man willing to speak up on their behalf.
Rush had an amazing sense of what people who tended to think like he did, where they were coming from.
He's just becoming a bigger and bigger deal, especially for men. It becomes like their clubhouse.
In only a year, his audience swells to almost 1 million people on 172 stations. His listeners soak up his lack of political correctness, and so long as he's beating up on liberals, they don't care if what he's saying is true. If Rush says it, they believe it.
And so the simple fact of the matter is that the homeless advocacy in this country is, I think, based upon fraud.
This guy doesn't just get his facts wrong, he turns them upside down. My name is Jeff Cohen. I founded the Media Watch Group Fair that debunked and documented Rush Limbaugh's reign of error. I remember the first time I heard Limbaugh. I was in a cab in New York City. And I was in that cab for about 20 minutes. In the first 20 minutes, I said, this is one of the biggest charlatans in the history of talk radio. He once said that, this was handed to me on a silver platter. Not quite true. His first radio job, he hosted a show on a local radio station, and his dad was the part owner.
I don't think he cared about the truth. I don't think it was important to him. That wasn't the goal of his show.
I never knew from the beginning if Rush Limbaugh believed a word he said.
A lot of people say, you really believe the stuff you say? I don't know what you're going to figure out.
I think Rush knew, in many instances, he was not telling the truth. Even after being corrected, he would keep saying the lie.
Limbaugh isn't just loose with his facts. He's also becoming more and more derisive towards the social and political groups he targets.
It's no secret the talk show host offends many people, including gays, women, Democrats, and liberals.
There was a lot of complaining about liberals and Democrats and women and black people.
Making fun of gay people. Making fun of people with HIV.
The thing that a lot of liberals start to feel is that he was in him.
Early on, Limbaugh popularizes the term feminazi to describe any woman who's pro-choice. Something he's called out for when he appears on Donahue.
Feminazis? Feminists are Nazis?
I don't think that the feminists say we're feminists, we're fierce, and we're in your face, which is clearly us against men, is representative of the majority of women in this country or people.
Not to psychoanalyze Rush, but he seemed to have issues with women, and he seemed to have issues with sex. There seemed to be a real ugly anger for women that would come out publicly on his show.
How many of you guys, in your own experience with women, have learned that no means yes if you know how to spot it?
I mean, I guess people could say Rush was a sexist. He said sexist things. You know what? My father said sexist things when I was growing up. My dad's not a sexist. My name is Nick Africano. I was a producer for Rush Limbaugh, the television show, from 91 to 95. Can you use language on TV? Oh, okay. I mean, I'm not going to say.
I think, like a lot of misogynists, it wasn't his fault. It's those damn women, and it's the feminists and the feminazis.
Despite increasing outrage from activist groups, Rush Limbaugh doesn't get canceled like he might today. Instead, he's rewarded. CBS asked Limbaugh to guest host Pat Sajak's talk show, but it's a request they will soon regret.
Affirmative action is an insult. Sir, please sit down. We'll get to you in good time.
By 1990, Rush Limbaugh, the right-wing radio phenomenon, becomes Rush Limbaugh, the human cash machine. Along with his $1 million salary, Limbaugh hawks an ever-growing range of excellence in broadcasting merchandise. Along with the Rush to Excellence public speaking tour, where he earns $250,000 a year off fans willing to pay for in-person jokes about what he calls libtards.
The latest craze among progressive homosexuals has resulted in numerous gay men reporting to hospital emergency rooms needing gerbils surgically removed from their rectum.
Rush would get particularly ugly, making fun of the whole elf and just stabbed people and twisted that knife in a much uglier fashion than when he's just going after somebody because of climate change or some other issue.
His increasingly toxic diatribes earn him more and more fans, the most diehard of which he nicknames the Ditto Heads.
Rush himself would call them Ditto Heads. started calling themselves ditto heads. Means that they just agree with everything that Rush Limbaugh says.
By the way, ditto and a half from the land of the long life time.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
A ditto head was just a rabid fan. I agree with you, ditto.
Politically, I agree with him beautifully. I always agree with him.
My dad was such a ditto head that he said, I don't agree with everything Rush says. Rush agrees with everything I think. I'm Jen Senko. I'm an award-winning filmmaker, director of The Brainwashing of My Dad.
Like many Americans in the 90s, Jen's dad discovers Rush Limbaugh
along with Rush Limbaugh
on the car radio during his daily commute to work.
Before Rush, my dad was, a Democrat. To keep himself company, he found talk radio. He wasn't much into music, but the guy on the radio was racist, sexist, homophobe, and always pounding on liberals and Democrats and demonizing them. Democrats are evil. Democrats are not patriotic. Democrats are going to just destroy the country. And so my dad found Rush Limbaugh and fell in man love and became addicted to Limbaugh. It was like the Pod People, that movie. This is the body of my dad, but it's not my dad.
You have to understand that if you're driving a truck or you're in an auto body shop or you're a homemaker, they're spending 15 hours a week with him. And he's, almost that could be more than they're spending with their spouses. He becomes part of their families. He becomes, a friend to them. And they form this bond.
It's just a bunch of wacko leftist environmentalists who are continuing their assault on capitalist America.
Rush became my father's best friend. He locked himself in the kitchen for 3 hours and would have these Limbaugh lunches. And my mom was cast to the living room to eat her lunch in the living room. I remember thinking that my dad's addicted to this anger.
And the number of Americans addicted to Limbaugh is growing. And as long as his audience continues to grow, the show's corporate sponsors don't seem to mind the vitriol.
When it comes to the U.S. media, it's corporations that are the owners, and that can never be forgotten. That these media corporations were willing to give a voice to a guy who is a champion of the overdog. He defended tobacco industry, he defended the pharmaceutical companies, they're huge advertisers. And he was beating up on these powerless groups. So the big corporations, I think, were happy to give him a microphone.
In March of 1990, the executives at media giant CBS choose to ignore Limbaugh's attacks against minority groups when they asked him to guest host Pat Sajak's failing talk show.
This is CBS. This is the big time. This is they're trying to see, could Limbaugh be a star in late night television? He is on the radio.
As you know, there's been a controversy brewing all week regarding the Idaho abortion bill.
Rush quickly discovers what happens when you do your bellicose act in front of a non-ditto head crowd.
You'll never have a baby. You'll never be pregnant. You'll never have to have an abortion.
Madam?
Yes, Rush.
Why are you so mad?
Why am I mad?
Yeah.
Because women are dying every day all over the world because of people like you.
A bunch of activists are in the audience, and they start talking back to him.
We are going to be wherever you are, and we're going to denounce and expose you.
It's just an utter, unmitigated disaster.
Rush Limbaugh never handled opposition well.
Go back to the radio, Rush.
Rush Limbaugh never, ever really was put in a position from the beginning where he had to defend his point of view.
Finally, some of the people he's been denouncing from his throne are there confronting him. And it was an embarrassing moment for him.
Limbaugh gives up on TV for now and returns to the safety of his 3-hour-a-day radio program.
In TV, we had a live audience, and I think that was a fair bit difficult for him. When he was behind the radio, he just had to crank the mic on and get talking. It was pretty easy that way in terms having to deal with anybody.
From behind his mic, Rush can do what he does best. Spout off about feminists, immigrants, and minority groups he thinks are all destroying the real America. And his opinions soon reach the inner circles of a political group that agrees with him.
Slowly, Republican consultants, Republican staffers, Republican politicians are being turned to be really politically beneficial.
The Republican Party woke up to the fact that, oh my God, this guy is channeling our voters better than we are, and we better embrace him pragmatically and politically.
The Republican who embraces Rush the most is a man named Roger Ailes.
Before Rush, there was Roger Ailes.
Roger Ailes, who is a television producer and political consultant, responsible for lots of famous ads.
One of his most notorious is Revolving Door, a campaign commercial for the Bush Quail ticket in 1988. The ad is a not-so-subtle suggestion that voting for Michael Dukakis means black criminals get released from prison.
This was calculated to emphasize the one African American here.
Roger Ailes was one of the most important figures in the history of the modern Republican Party and the modern media. Ailes worked for Richard Nixon's campaigns, later worked for Reagan, worked for Bush the First.
He already had this idea that he wanted to make news that would be biased towards Republicans and that would earn Republican voters.
In a few years' time, Ailes will help create Fox News, the conservative wing of Rupert Murdoch's media empire. But in 1992, he's helping transform Limbaugh from a right-wing bomb thrower into a guided missile.
Roger Ailes and Rush were two of a kind. In fact, when they met, Roger Ailes said it felt like he met his soulmate.
In June of 1992, he arranged for Rush Limbaugh to come to the White House. And George Bush the First carries his overnight bag into the Lincoln bedroom of the White House.
Think about this. This is a guy who's been fired like 5 times and even registered to vote, and in less than a decade he's sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom. Like, you could never have picked a guy who was more unlikely to be a political star in short order than Rush Limbaugh.
Roger Ailes believes enough in Limbaugh to bring him back to TV by creating the Rush Limbaugh Show. Learning from the Pat Sajak fiasco, Ailes fills the studio audience with loyal ditto heads. The show premieres syndication in September of 1992, just a few months before Clinton challenges Bush for the presidency.
Rush danced to his drum, and he said things that lots of people didn't like. He made people crazy. But you know what? If you play it safe, I guess people don't talk about you.
Leading up to the election-long attack ad against Democrats and the Clintons.
A woman is like a tea bag. Put her in hot water, she just gets stronger. And,
we made fun of Hillary Clinton for sure. Gosh. And Bill Clinton.
Back and forth, can't make up his mind which way he wants to go. That's what it looks like when Bill Clinton gets close to a selective service office.
During the run-up to the election, Clinton focuses on winning over young and black voters by appearing on shows like Arsenio Hall. Meanwhile, Bush Sr. relies on Limbaugh and attacking Clinton's military draft record.
Speaking to a national radio audience today, President Bush told conservative talk show host Rush Limbaugh he doesn't want to make a big deal out of Clinton's draft status, but he did call on the Democrat to give a full explanation of his non-service.
The only problem with Limbaugh criticizing Clinton for dodging the draft is that Limbaugh did the exact same thing, but for different reasons.
There were a lot of good reasons to criticize Bill Clinton, but Bill Clinton was opposed to the Vietnam War that he evaded. Rush Limbaugh supported the Vietnam War. He just wanted other people to fight it for him.
Rush and other outspoken leaders in conservative media, I think, do best when they have an enemy that they can rail against. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama.
You know, listen, the Clintons, fair game. And they took a lot of people apart on the way to where they were. So I never felt like
fair fight.
While Rush starts out his TV show with the same humorous political jabs he perfected on radio, it's not long before he crosses the line into petty personal attacks.
He was cruel from the beginning.
On January 20th, 1993, Bill Clinton gets sworn in as the 42nd President of the United States. Immediately, he outlines his vision for change.
We're going to ask the rich to pay their fair share so the rest of America can finally get a break.
For Democrats, it's a moment of triumph. The first time they've held the White House in 12 long years. And while Limbaugh publicly decries Clinton as a dangerous liberal and a threat to conservative values,
So I think it's pretty much far-left liberalism that seeks to raise the level of incompetence to the level of competence.
privately he celebrates. With Clinton as president, Limbaugh has the perfect target for all his grievances, and that means more listeners and more money.
Bill Clinton beats Bush in 92. The fact that Rush had Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton to go after, I think that, more than almost anything else, really helped grow his show.
The Clintons give him something to be against. Not only is there a Democrat in the White House trying to do liberal things, but he's a guy who they think is like the worst from a moral standpoint. They're looking for someone who's going to voice that, and Limbaugh provides them that.
Yes, he gave voice to a hell of a lot of people who felt voiceless, but Rush Limbaugh taught people during the 90s that it's okay to demonize your political opponents.
I never did them the way they are doing us in Washington, D.C. today. It is wrong, and it is not good for the United States of America.
Oh, dissent and disagreement is not good for the United States of America. We're so sorry, Mr. President. So sorry.
He hammered Clinton. Trump whined that he was the most picked on president like ever. But really, before Clinton, there was no president that was hammered as much as he was.
When attacking the Clintons proves to be the magic formula for attracting even bigger audiences, Rush seems willing to say anything to appease his fans. That includes ridiculing the Clintons' 13-year-old daughter, Chelsea.
Let's take a look, see who is the cute kid in the White House. No, that's not the kid. That's the kid. We try to...
Look how hurtful that.
He was a pioneer in many things, and one of the things he pioneered in was nastiness, name-calling, and coarseness gone public.
I got the sense that he was beaten up when he was younger, and he would then lash out. Projection, he would lash out and take off after, take off after the way Chelsea Clinton looks.
I don't think anybody was comfortable with that. I wasn't comfortable with it. Looking back on it, I'm less comfortable today. I have children.
His own mom calls him up and scolds him for that. You don't attack children. So yes, there is some stuff where he's crossing the line, where it's over the top, but these people who hate Clinton find a lot of it entertaining.
By far, the more disturbing aspect of that was how his audience reacted. And they ate it up.
The reaction from Limbaugh's critics was often just as over the top.
Yeah, one day we were opening the mail and someone sent us feces, human feces in the mail. FedEx. I was the one that opened it. I'm going to send poop, and guess how I'm going to get them to open it? I'm going to send it FedEx.
But the parcel does nothing to stop Limbaugh from trash-talking the left, including making shit up if it helps to advance his anti-liberal agenda.
He says, the Clintons send their daughter to a school where all the 8th graders have to write an essay, Why I Feel Guilty Being White. CBS News is my source. There was no CBS News report. There was no essay. It would have been very hard for the 25% of the people at Chelsea Clinton's school who are non-white to write the inflammatory essay. But again, these lies, these concoctions are in furtherance of a serious political perspective, which is white people are oppressed. The people that are wrecking society are the feminazis, the homeless, the immigrants, the gays, and the people dying of AIDS. And those are the people he would fume about.
Now, so this next one, I want to warn you, some of you liberals, you're going to be unhappy at this. I love it.
While taking cheap shots at the Clintons can be ignored as harmless political satire, the rise of the Christian right and right-wing radical groups makes Limbaugh's rhetoric increasingly dangerous.
We are for the Second Amendment, for the American people to arm themselves, and when we take over, we're going to level the IRS building.
Rush said the things that they were told that they couldn't say or weren't supposed to say. It also combined with sort of like the evangelical movement that was going on at that time.
Rush Limbaugh came along with a more secular approach, but the wave he rode in on was televangelism. He was able to prey on the social resentments and the resentments against modernity and feminism and gay rights that people were getting from right-wing Christian preachers.
By the end of 1994, Rush has 20 million listeners on radio and several million viewers on TV. That gives him an audience similar to shows like Seinfeld and Friends.
Those were his, glory days, man. He's making a shitload of money. He's eating, he's drinking, he's smoking his cigars, he's living life large, and he looked like on TV.
Trappings of success. I think the best place that you see this is politically, because he becomes a rock star specifically to conservatives. And maybe the best way of understanding this is the 1994 Republican Revolution.
The revolution, led by Congressman Newt Gingrich, happens during the midterm elections of '94, when for the first time in 40 years, Republicans win a majority in Congress. It's a major upset for the Democrats, and Republicans in and out of politics know exactly who to thank: Rush Limbaugh and his legions of ditto heads.
These are not unimportant people who are like, will you take a picture with me? Can I have your autograph? Like, they treat him like a rock star.
But just as he's basking in the conservative limelight, America gets rocked by a homegrown terrorist who doesn't quite fit into Limbaugh's carefully crafted worldview.
It's about feeding your audience what you think they want to hear. And Rush Limbaugh knew that his audience wanted to blame a Muslim.
On April 19th, 1995, the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City gets hit by a terrorist attack. The toll is devastating. 168 are confirmed dead, including 19 children.
Rush Limbaugh was one of many commentators after the Oklahoma City bombing happened that immediately rushed to assume this is foreign and let's retaliate. Let's bomb somebody, goddammit. That was par for the course, but Limbaugh had the biggest audience to say that with.
Within just 3 days, the FBI tracks down the real terrorist, American-born and bred Timothy McVeigh. His motivation? Retaliation for the FBI's handling of the Waco siege in Texas exactly 2 years earlier.
And then we learned that the terrorist was connected to right-wing militia groups, grew up around Buffalo, New York. And all of a sudden, it was like, I never said those things. Clearly we don't want to be bombing Buffalo, New York.
The thing that a lot of liberals start to feel is that talk radio hosts are encouraging hate. Not only are they, preaching kind of hatred and anger towards Democratic politicians, that this can easily spill over, right? That if you preach that these people are attacking America, they're attacking American values, the logical leap for some of the fringe of the audience, that there could be people out there who are moved to violence.
Timothy McVeigh represents white dudes in America who didn't feel a connection to anything. Rush Limbaugh would have helped give them a voice. Rush gave them a home.
In the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing, as many Americans try to come together and heal, Rush Limbaugh downplays the role that white conservatism played in the tragedy and continues his obsession with poking fun at the Clintons.
Well, look at it this way, sir. If you are reelected, you'll have more time to practice your golf game.
I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, so are we.
The pleasure Rush gets from speaking falsehoods is only matched by his love of spreading fake conspiracies. Case in point, Jeff Cohen remembers when Limbaugh tried to pin a fictional murder on Hillary Clinton.
He went on the air breathlessly to read something he got, like, faxed to him.
Okay, folks, I think I got enough information here to tell you the contents of this fax that I got. Brace yourselves. There's a Washington consulting firm that is scheduled to release a report this afternoon that will be published, that claims that Vince Foster was murdered in an apartment owned by Hillary Clinton, and the body was then taken to Fort Marcy Park.
Rush Limbaugh in action.
Vince Foster was the associate White House counsel who had committed suicide. There's never been any evidence otherwise.
I mean, how do you go on the air when you get something off of the fax machine accusing the First Lady of the United States of murder? It was part of this conspiracy crap that he was so good at, at telling, was these giant conspiracies.
The conspiracies don't sit well with his more mainstream TV viewers, and in the summer of 1996, the show is canceled.
In today's Washington Watch, Rush Limbaugh is reportedly dropping his syndicated television show.
While Rush focuses on his 3-hour radio show, his old friend and soulmate, Roger Ailes, launches Fox News. Using Rush as the template, Fox spawns a slew of hosts who channel Limbaugh's conservative fury.
What you see today is all a derivation of Rush Limbaugh. Sean Hannity's, Bill O'Reilly, these guys just didn't know how to do it. They didn't have the verve he had.
Then, when Bill Clinton leaves the White House, Rush Limbaugh loses his favorite punching bag.
He really needed to be the opposition. It's not helpful for him when George Bush II becomes president, because he needs to be bashing away at the Democrats in power.
And while he finds himself in the grip of a vice he spent his career railing against.
Like millions of people, he got hooked on opiates.
In 2003, the mainstream media gives Rush Limbaugh yet another chance on TV when ESPN hires him to commentate on NFL football.
And he only lasts like 4 or 5 weeks because he starts talking about Donovan McNabb of the Philadelphia Eagles and black quarterbacks.
The media has been very desirous that a black quarterback do well.
It says something about U.S. corporate greed, that they would take a guy like Rush Limbaugh with his history of racial contempt.
That history will get another chapter when Limbaugh says the following a few years later on his radio show.
Let me put it to you this way. The NFL, all too often, looks like a game between the Bloods and the Crips.
3 years later, in 2006, the king of right-wing media reveals the true depths of his hypocrisy when he's arrested on prescription drug charges.
I remember Rush in the 90s railed against, people who did drugs and drug addicts, and my dad agreed with him. Yeah, they should just be locked up and throw away the key.
He admits he went around doctor shopping, getting these drugs from different doctors, and the prosecutor has a open and shut case, but drops the charge.
He looks a little bit hypocritical when he confesses that he has drug addiction and cuts a deal on criminal charges and things.
The drug war affected poor people and people of color, the kind of people Rush Limbaugh belittled for decades, and the Rush Limbaughs of the world got off.
By the time that Rush's own addiction came out, the Rush community was a full-on cult. And so the cult leader can do no wrong.
certainly true when Limbaugh begins spreading the falsehood to his listeners that Barack Obama isn't really a natural-born American citizen.
He was one of the birthers that at the same time that Donald Trump was questioning that Obama is not a legitimate president because he wasn't born in the United States, Limbaugh was doing that conspiracy, that fake conspiracy.
I think Rush Limbaugh knew that was bullshit, and yet he still put it out there. Now, to me, I find that to be a lot more dangerous than some idiot who actually believes that Obama's not an American citizen. Trump's a dumbass, so Trump doesn't know what he's doing, but Rush knew.
The reason that Trump was so effective with fake news
came along in 2016. Why was he so able to so easily demagogue? Because he came along to a group of people who were perfectly okay being lied to.
Then, in 2020, Rush Limbaugh announces that he has stage 4 lung cancer and that he won't be spending as much time on the air.
There's an immediate outpouring from the radio industry and the conservative media worlds wishing him well, and Trump gives him the Medal of Freedom at the 2020 State of the Union address.
The First Lady of the United States to present you with the honor, please.
That to me is an insult to gay people, women, people of color. It's just an insult, and no one cares. The modern Republican Party has been reshaped in Limbaugh's image. That's what has to be understood.
After 30 years of that guy on the radio spewing disinformation and lies, to the point where the entire base of the Republican Party right now no longer believes in basic truths. I mean, think about that.
6 weeks before his death in February 2021, Limbaugh's still at it, claiming election fraud on behalf of Trump and helping incite the insurrection on Capitol Hill.
There's simply no way Joe Biden was legitimately elected president.
When you talk about the extremism of the American right, Limbaugh probably played a bigger role than anyone alive or dead to do that, to shape that.
I have fond memories, and I've never said a bad word about the guy, and I never would. You can disagree with him. Good people can disagree with him, and have, and will continue.
His legacy is division. He purposely divided America. He's not the only one, and there's plenty of blame to go around, but he had a huge microphone. America right now is dangerously divided. Rush Limbaugh played a huge hand in that.
It's immeasurable, the damage that Rush Limbaugh has caused to society.
Có lúc muốn biết em với anh là gì, chỉ là bản thân chơi với nhau không cần gì, mà sao từng phút giây tình yêu nào có hay cứ đến với ta chẳng thể nào kịp nhận ra. Anh vẫn cứ nhớ nhung đến em hằng ngày. Em là tình yêu hay lẽ sống trên đời này, nàng như là đóa hoa một thiên thần sứ, xa khiến cho ta ngất ngây không tìm được lối ra. Chẳng biết đến bao giờ nào đâu có anh ngờ tình yêu đã lỡ trao cho nhau. Người yêu mãi không rời đành cứ thế thôi người, sâu trong trái tim anh hằng mong ước muốn nói với em bao điều. Dù cho trời đổi thay em là người anh không thể thiếu, anh sẽ mãi mãi yêu em như vậy. Chỉ mong là chúng ta tình yêu sẽ đong đầy. Mỗi lần gặp em trên phố anh cũng chẳng biết nói gì hơn. Em cứ xinh mà không cần phải cố. Ai cũng biết em là mai cơn, chẳng cần đau khổ mỗi khi âu sầu, vì em đã có anh ở bên. Những kỷ niệm mà vẫn giữ trong đầu, anh luôn đặt nó ở trên. Về anh yêu em hơn tất cả, dẫu cho sau này nắng mưa anh không bao giờ sợ vất vả. Dành cho em thì anh sẽ luôn giữ bởi tình yêu ngọt như ly sữa trắng, cũng bị đắng như tách cà phê đến. Em cứ yên tâm không cần lo lắng, đã có anh mang đi hết ưu phiền. Em là muốn nói với em bao điều, dù cho trời đổi thay, em là người anh không thể thiếu. Anh sẽ mãi mãi yêu em như vậy, chỉ mong là chúng ta tình yêu sẽ đong đầy. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Và sau tất cả, anh đã tự hỏi về tình cảm của chúng ta, bất chấp mọi thứ để đến với em, dù cuối cùng anh đã có thể nói em là đây như thế đó, anh sẽ yêu thật lòng. Sự thật là rất khó, thế giới luôn màu hồng, mặc cho ngàn khó khăn làm ta về cách ngàn nhưng vẫn mãi bên chẳng bao giờ